Hey everybody. The other day I shot a video where I was talking about my waterfall tank here, and after I was done I decided not to post it because it really amounted to me just sort of thinking out loud, and I didn't really come to any conclusions or anything. I just sort of talked about my waterfall tank, what I wanted to do with it, and I also talked about what I think went wrong with it and what I did wrong the first time around, and why I'm going to do it a little bit differently this time around, and how I'm going to do it, etc., etc. Again, it was just sort of me thinking out loud. Now, typically this is the kind of video I would post on my Patreon page, where I'm just kind of getting ready for what I'm going to do. I'm just sort of working through it and thinking it out and so on and so forth. But in this case, I do want to post this video here on YouTube because I am going to start moving forward with the waterfall today. I'm actually going to start ripping some of this stuff out, and I'm going to make a trip over to the Home Depot and get a few supplies, and so the process is going to begin. And before we get there, I want to sort of get everybody up to speed with where I am, what I'm thinking about, what I think I did wrong the first time, and how we're going to move forward. And so that's kind of what this video is going to be about. If you're not really interested in all that kind of stuff, you can probably stop watching already. But if you do want to just sort of hear my thoughts about it and hear where, which direction we're going to go and how we're going to move forward or whatever, then the next 7 or 8 minutes is for you. So thanks for watching. I'll see you real soon in the next one. Hey everybody. This is my waterfall tank. Although the waterfall is not flowing at the moment, I had some issues with some leaks. And the general game plan has been to tear all this down and to rebuild it. And now that it's been sitting here dry for several days, it's looking even rougher and rougher. But I've been thinking more and more about it, and I went outside this morning, and a little experimental rubber sheet that I had made to see if I could create a waterproof lining is still sitting outside. It's still dry as a bone. It's holding water, and it's been sitting out there through some pretty heavy rainstorms. It's been sitting out in the 120-degree sun, and it's holding water without any problems whatsoever. And it was really easy to make, and it's just got me thinking about whether or not I really want to tear all this down and rebuild it, or do I want to just sort of recoat it and re-waterproof it. And while as much as I'd like to see something different and new, and I'd like to, have the experience of trying to build something different, it's just not really practical right now. I just don't have the money for it. I don't really honestly have the time or the desire right now to start tearing this down and rebuilding it and doing something new. So I think I am going to just sort of revamp this one and get it up and running. It should not be that terribly difficult. And I've also decided I'm going to not use my little rubber silicone sheet idea, but I am going to use something very similar. I'm going to do the same idea, except I'm going to use, it's like the Flex Seal. It's a latex rubberized paint. It's just not the Flex Seal brand, so I don't have to pay all that money for the name brand of Flex Seal, but I am going to be using a latex rubberized paint. And the reason I'm going to be doing that is because I've been doing some research about whether or not I could even get the latex to stick to cured silicone, which is what this is covered in already. And what I found was that you can't get anything to stick to cured silicone. So even if I do use more silicone rubber and I make a rubber sheet and just lay it over top of all of this, it's not going to adhere to it. It's going to just be a rubber sheet laying over top of it. I also won't be able to paint it or do anything to it once it's on there, which is why you can see I colored the rubber itself. So it was already sort of pre-colored, because you can't paint silicone unless you use very special paint that's got special adhesives in it and it's designed for silicone and so on and so forth. And I'm certainly not doing all that. So using the latex, the rubberized sheet that I'll make out of latex, I'll then be able to do stuff with it. I'll be able to actually bond things to it. I'll be able to paint it. I could just use simple basic latex paint, and I could paint it whatever color scheme I wanted, or paint faux background or rocks or whatever. So I think that's a good idea. But I also learned why I had so many issues with it leaking. Remember what I just said. You can't even get silicone to stick to cured silicone. So every time I came in here and painted a new coat of silicone rubber over the previous coat that I just put on there the day before, I wasn't thickening a coat of silicone. I was just adding layer after layer after layer. So it was a bunch of individual little thin sheets that never really stuck to the sheet below it. And that wouldn't necessarily be a problem. I mean, if you put enough thin layers down on something, it creates the effectiveness of a thick layer. Where I ran into problems was I would paint this area, you know, I'd make up a batch of this dark green stuff, and I'd paint this area, and I'd put a little over here, and I'd put a little up there, and I'd let that cure. And I'd come back the next day, and I'd make this sort of brown color, and I'd put a little up here, and I'd put a little down here, and I'd put a little over here, and I'd come back later, and I'd put a little different stuff up here, and then I'd paint another coating in this, and then I'd paint another coating on that. And I hodgepodged it, I patchworked it. And so if you think about that, none of those little patches bonded. They might have kind of stuck to it, but they never bonded to the layer below it. So over time, all these little layers could peel up and separate, and water could weep through them. And so not knowing that the silicone wasn't sticking to itself was really detrimental to my process. Had I known that, I would have done it very differently. I would have done a full coat and let it cure, and then I would have done another full coat and let it cure, or I would have painted the rubber sheet where I could have done one thick coat and made it one thick layer, or possibly I would have used the latex rubberized paint. And in fact, I started using the Flex Seal paint on this, and then I painted the silicone over the Flex Seal. So it probably never even bonded to what's under there. So I have so many mishmashed layers of stuff glopped and stuck over this thing. At this point, it just makes sense to just cover the whole thing with another sheet and then build up from there, and basically use this as a starting point foundation and kind of view it as porous material. But I'm going to tear all this old stuff out of there. I'm going to rip all this liner that I put in there as a patch. I think I'm going to take this off the top and maybe rework how the water flows in. But the general overall structure, where we have a basin, the water will flow out and down. It'll flow through a channel into another basin, and then we'll flow out and we'll get the waterfall effect coming down here. That is probably going to be the basics for it. I may add a channel here so the water flows and we get a sort of splashy, flowy waterfall on this side. I can modify it, and of course the plants and everything that'll go in, it'll be different looking. But I think that's what we're going to do. I think I'm going to just stick with what's already here, just for practicality's sake right now. I just can't afford to start redoing this whole thing. But we are going to use that rubberized latex paint rather than silicone this time. So just a little update on what I've been thinking about this morning. I know that wasn't a whole lot other than listening to me think out loud. We're not going to actually get started on this today, other than maybe starting to pull some of that stuff out of there. But stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss all of the details. I'm sure I'll do something interesting with this. I can usually make something creative out of, you know, what I've already got to work with. So we'll do something fun. So again, make sure you're subscribed. You won't miss it or anything else I got coming up. I do have several other tanks I'm kind of working on at the moment. Not just in terms of, you know, getting them cleaned up. I actually do have tanks that I'm experimenting with. I'm working on water hardness in this one. I'm working on a quick cycling experiment in this. And next we are actually going to do some deep bed substrate experimenting with this tank. I think it's time to start moving in that direction. And since I've got a new tank that I'm getting ready to start on, we're going to start this one with a deep sand substrate and kind of go from there and have some experiments with that. So again, make sure you're subscribed. You won't miss anything I got coming up. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget, this one here is my waterfall tank. I'll see you real soon in the next one.